And now the spiel, the right take on the police and excessive force. The death of Eric Garner was heartbreaking. The decision not to indict the officer was backbreaking, in that it broke the resolve of many who normally give police every benefit of the doubt, the usual defenders of police, people who said either that the Ferguson shooting was justified or who said, as I did, that the shooting wasn't right and it was terrible policing, but that doesn't mean that there should have been an indictment if you go by the letter of the law. But the death of Staten Islander Eric Garner is in a different category. Take Charles Krauthammer, always on Fox News, a Fox News all-star, he's called. He was not saying the usual stuff about how we need not look at this incident. We should look at black-on-black crime. He wasn't saying that the victim brought it on himself. Here's what he was saying.
From looking at the video, the grand jury's decision here is totally incomprehensible. It looks as if at least they might have indicted him on something like in involuntary manslaughter at the very least. The guy actually said, I can't breathe, which ought to be a signal that, and the guy was unarmed, and the crime was as petty as they come.
That last bit about cigarette peddling being a crime as petty as they come, that was jumped on by Salon, which characterized reactions like Krauthammer's as, quote, the right-wing response to Eric Garner's death, blame Bloomberg and NYC's cigarette tax. I think that's unfair. A lot of conservatives were decrying police brutality, and they were saying there should have been an indictment. Sure, they were also blaming the underlying law for being quote-unquote ridiculous, but you know what? That's not so different from, say, this cri de coeur of a Staten Island resident who was quoted on NPR.
A man's life was taken for misdemeanor action. For selling cigarettes, loose cigarettes, you're going to lose your life over that? Come on, it had to have been a better way.
Unlike the Ferguson case, I see the right and left coming together on this issue. Not all of the right, but a lot of the right. We heard from Krauthammer. I went on the website of the National Review. They seem to take a while to process the Garner non-indictment. There was no article up as of 6 o'clock this morning, but by a little later in the day, they had a couple of prominent posts saying the grand jury may have gotten it wrong. May, but still. Now, over on Glenn Beck's site, The Blaze, the news coverage was pretty straight down the middle, but many, and maybe even a slight majority of commentators wanted an indictment. Yeah, there were law and order conservatives who argued law and order that Garner shouldn't have resisted arrest, but then there were others like Flyover Country who argued, quote, history will likely lump these two, meaning Garner and Ferguson, will lump these two instances together, but I think they are different. Darren Wilson intended to use deadly force and was exonerated in doing so. This guy in New York did not intend to use lethal force, and it became lethal. I believe Michael Brown got what he deserved, but Eric Garner did not. This instance should see a trial. Now, over at Newsmax, an article quoted former NYPD Commissioner Bernie Kerik, without, it should be noted, informing readers that he is also ex-felon Bernie Kerik. But the headline was, ex-NYPD Chief Kerik on Garner case, you cannot resist arrest. What is wrong with giving the citizen, say, 5 minutes with the officer to calm down and realize the futility of resisting? In my experience, the commenters on these sites are true, self-identified conservatives, and the disagreement over the justice given was genuine. Now, you could argue that it is a failure of empathy or imagination to see the Michael Brown case as not also being excessive, even if Brown had just robbed a convenience store. That's just not how conservatives see it, however. And you could blame conservatives for failing to see that there is a racial element in the Garner case, that they need the libertarian cigarette tax element as cover for their ire might be a flaw. I look at this optimistically. The left is universally appalled by what happened to Eric Garner. Most of the American middle, or even people who are not at all politically engaged, don't understand why the NYPD had to go to all those lengths to subdue Eric Garner. And many, if not most, on the vocal right are disturbed by it too. As I have said before, there is no such thing as a perfect victim, but Eric Garner comes pretty close, and a videotaped one at that, who leaves behind 6 children in a city where the majority of the population wanted an indictment, where the police commissioner seems genuinely concerned about excessive policing, where the mayor has expressed worry for the safety of his African-American son. Remember before when I said the Eric Garner case was backbreaking? On second consideration, if the hard work of reform is the goal, it just may be spine-stiffening. And now the spiel. 'Tis a gift to be anxious? The day before Thanksgiving, the Wall Street Journal ran an op-ed about Abraham Lincoln. He declared Thanksgiving a national holiday, and this, of course, was during a time of war. Lincoln was rightly portrayed for having fortitude and for offering hope in the face of the ills that beset the republic. That's all good. But this historical recollection was framed by statements indicating that now, too, is a challenging time. It calls upon all of our resources of perseverance. Second to last line in the piece talks about when so many of our sons, daughters, and their families still bear the burden of protecting democracy,